Hi, my name is Country Joe College. I want to talk to you a little bit about effectiveness with teenagers. Teenagers struggle every day of their lives with issues of power and freedom. Issues of power and freedom. What do we mean by that? Well, let's go back to your early childhood, or my early childhood. Once upon a time, you had no idea what money was. No idea at all. Shiny, round, silvery things that maybe you could roll across the floor. Pieces of paper with green ink on them. That was about all you knew and all I knew, if we even knew that much. But then one day, you went to the store and traded in these shiny, silvery, round things, or this piece of paper with green ink on it, for something real, like candy or gum or something good to eat. This was your first experience with issues of power and freedom. We use power and freedom to find out what the constraints on our behavior and the restraints on our behavior really are. We pretty quickly learn physical constraints on our behavior. Say I'm a toddler running around the kitchen and my mother is cooking something good for supper. And so I can smell this supper cooking on the stove. I say to my mother, "Smells good. What is it?" And what does she say? "Hot. Don't touch. Hot." Do I understand what that means? Even if I did understand, would I let it go? Most likely not. So I reach my hand up and touch the hot stove. Ow, ow. This is how we learn physical constraints on our behavior. And we usually learn them pretty quickly because when we run into a physical constraint, there's often physical pain associated with it. Teenagers are in the process of learning social constraints. And that's maybe one reason why they're so difficult. Because learning social constraints doesn't hurt like learning physical constraints often do. There is no hot stove for a teenager to touch when he or she is learning social constraints. So begin to look at power and freedom as the tools with which teenagers learn social constraints on their behavior. When we understand that teenagers are all about learning power and freedom, we can begin to realize that it's just learning. Remember when you were learning how to ride a two-wheeler? Learning to ride a two-wheeler is like working with physical constraints, because the two-wheeler obviously doesn't stand up by itself. It needs somebody on it to balance it. And that's the part that we learn when we're learning to ride two-wheelers. Did you ever crash when you were learning to ride a two-wheeler? Or were you such a good athlete that you never crashed? Or maybe you practice on a very small bike where you didn't crash. But I'll bet the first time you tried a two-wheeler that was your own size, you had several crashes. Were you criticized for that? Did somebody make a judgment and say, "You clumsy kid, you ain't never going to learn how to ride a two-wheeler"? I'll bet they didn't, because we don't make judgments about learning physical constraints the way that we learn judgment, the way that we make judgments about when teenagers are learning social constraints. When we as the adults begin to accept and work with the fact that teenagers are always in a learning situation, guess what? We can begin to let go of judging them. Just like we do not judge people who make mistakes when they're learning to ride a two-wheeler. What happens then? If we as the adults do not make judgments about teenage behavior as they are learning, that enables us eventually to become, when we're dealing with them. What does do for us as the adults as we're trying to manage and control teenagers? Well, it begins to enable us to use power indirectly. Let's talk about that for a minute. Teenagers have experienced, for the most part, only direct power in their young lives. Direct power either through physicality, meaning that sit down and shut up or I'll beat you up, or I'll throw you to the ground, or I'll hit you upside of the head. That's direct power coming from being physical. Or direct power coming from hierarchy. I'm the sheriff, I'm the teacher, I'm the parent, I'm the police officer, I'm the boss, you're going to do what I say. That's pretty much the kinds of power that teenagers have experienced. So when we begin to be able to use power indirectly, they're confused, but they're fascinated. They know it's real power, but since they've never run into it before, they can't figure it out, and they become puzzled about how to respond. This is where we as the adults begin to take back the control from them. And indirect power finally enable us to create, when we have teens in a group situation, enables us to create positive culture. What do we mean by culture? Well, think of culture not only as the end result of the behavior of lots and lots of people, which is similar. Think of culture as a force in and of itself. The mafia is a culture, negative culture. The Marines are a very positive culture. The Irish and the Italians are a positive ethnic culture. Culture is the most powerful force known to humankind in terms of controlling, modifying, or changing human behavior. And when we're able to use power indirectly, because we understand that teenagers are struggling with issues of power and freedom as they are learning social constraints. When we're able to do that, we can artificially create a positive culture whenever teenagers are together in a group situation, a continuing group situation, such as a high school classroom, such as an alternative school classroom, such as a residential facility for teens or a group home. This is the way that we begin to eliminate bullying, harassment, intimidation, and all the rest of it.